Testing. Let's see if that's working. All right. Okay. Welcome everybody to CanHammer TV. And welcome to 2020 and Happy New Year to everybody out there. It is January 9th, in fact, and we are here with a new year of CanHammer TV. Super excited. And so thank you for joining me. This episode today, we're going to talk and wrap up and debrief from Charity Hammer, which I attended last weekend. Still kind of recovering physically. If you've never woken up at 3 a.m. to play Warhammer, then that's certainly something you should try. But it was physically and mentally exhausting, and I didn't even play that many games. I think John Lennon played like 9 games or something. I think he played like 13 last year or whatever. I saw Jim Vessel at weird hours of the morning. It's quite a surreal experience. I'll try and explain to you what it was like on today's show. So that's basically what we're going to spend today doing, just talking about Charity Hammer. We're going to talk about who was there, what was played, the kind of meta going into LVO, since this is many of the favorites who are thought to have a chance of winning LVO, basically like 3 weeks before the big tournament. And we're going to talk a little bit about what I learned about Custodes and where I think my Custodes list is going. So lots to talk about today, and super excited. First of all, big shout out to our sponsors. Big shout out to Adam from Down Under Network. Cheers for the Team Australia ETC jersey, which is sweet, super awesome. So that was really cool. And so we'll get started. Happy New Year to George, who I found out is also from Australia, so that's awesome. First of all, before we go into anything, I'm going to apologize to my viewers and to our YouTube subscribers and to people who follow our channel. I did not film any content at Charity Hammer. I went with the intention of filming the whole thing. I filmed myself in the airport, I filmed myself in Calgary, and I filmed a little bit when I arrived in Seattle. And after that, I did not film anything. There's a few reasons for this. First of all, it was pretty busy. Second of all, when I was playing, I wanted to concentrate on playing and the stream, as opposed to whipping out my camera every so often and filming things. Third of all, I didn't end up playing many games outside of the stream times, and there's a few reasons for that we can talk about, but I didn't have the opportunity to play many games outside of the ones I played on stream. And also, it was so exhausting. I didn't really have the mental capacity or physical stamina to film content while playing or in between playing. And it's if I'm like there and I'm waiting for the next stream to start, it's 4 a.m. I don't know. I just couldn't think that I would be pulling out my camera to film content at 4 a.m. So I didn't want to intrude on everybody else and ask for interviews and stuff, because everybody else was going through the same thing. We really wanted to concentrate on putting on a good show to raise lots of money for charity. So I apologize. I did not film any content. There's plenty of content from Charity Hammer. There's over 48 hours of constant stream content from 3 separate channels. There's loads of content. You don't need to hear me talking about silly things at Charity Hammer. So today will serve as my content for the other things to do at Charity Hammer, but if you want to see any of the games from Charity Hammer, it's all there. And speaking of that, so if you want to see all the games in full stream detail, they will be available. They're available right now if you go to Twitch, BiffPod, so Best in Faction Pod. That's stream from table 1. Right here for stream from table 2, and Down Under Network, which is the stream from table 3. Now, Down Under Network did not run continuously, but it didn't run overnight mostly. It ran most of the rest of the time, and the first 2 streams ran all the time. And for the most part, everything is on schedule and everything was done well. So there you go. So there's lots to watch there. You can find it on our Twitch under the videos. Now, on Twitch, for us, it will only last for a couple of weeks. For BiffPod, I think it'll last for a month, and then these things get wiped. But we are in the process right now of downloading all the Twitch streams and uploading them to YouTube, where they will live forever. You can watch last year's Charity Hammer streams, for example. So that's in the process. When it's available, obviously, we'll be letting everybody know so that everybody can watch these games at any time. If you are going to LVO, and you are going to try and win it, I highly suggest you watch at least the RTT streams, because these are people and lists that you're going to play against. So be ready. But I got to encourage people to watch the other streams that were not the RTT as well. There's great games there, lots of random matchups. Some of these players playing alternative lists. There were a couple of learning games, so it was really cool. And hopefully next year we're going to expand on the non-RTT content as well. More learning games, things like that. So already looking forward to the next Charity Hammer, and we only just finished from this year. So if you don't know, and Charity Hammer, basically I won't talk too long about it. It was started by Colin and Mitch and Chuck at Best in Faction Podcast as a charity event where people are invited to play, and they do a 40K marathon basically and raise money. They raise money just from people donating to see content and to win raffle prizes basically. Last year was the first year. We were very honored to host the second stream, and I was not able to go last year, and this year it was super amazing because not only were we hosting the stream, but we were also, I was able to attend. So amazing. And last year we raised about just over $7,000, I think. This year we raised $12,000, which is amazing. You can still donate to Charity Hammer. So if you're still watching the content and you want to donate because you couldn't catch it on the weekend, do check it out and do donate. CharityHammer.com. You can still donate. I believe Colin's going to keep that link open a long time because he's going to start selling off some of the Charity Hammer objective markers and things like that. We didn't want to disrupt the donating by starting to sell things like t-shirts and stuff like that on the stream. You know, anything that would take away from the donations. Everything 100% goes to the charity, Child's Play. None of it went to us or Colin or his poor wife or anybody. We all paid our own way, and we stayed at people's houses, and everything, the food, nothing went to the event. All of it went 100% to charity. So well done to you guys for donating. And lots of people won raffle prizes, and so well done to you guys, because without people donating, it doesn't really work. So that's pretty cool. If you missed it, we shaved Alex McDougall's head live on stream. That's on the Sunday stream on the Down Under Network stream at around 2:30 p.m. So you'll be able to see that. Alex has a lot of hair and shaved it all off for charity because we hit the $10,000 mark. So that was pretty funny. Okay, so basically Charity Hammer was like 20-something people, mostly a lot of top ITC players, and then there were some of us other people who were kind of like personalities or podcast hosts or things like that, and then a few local people who were there just to help out, but also good players, and some tech support. And basically, as an attendee, we got to play at least 3 games. The guys who were in the RTT got to play more, which is fine. People want to see those guys. Don't really want to see scrubs like us. And then if you weren't playing, you were either resting or you had host duties. So at every table, for every stream, we had somebody on the Twitch chat talking, explaining, asking questions for people to the players, or feeding back what's happening to the chat, chatting, posting up lists, all that sort of stuff. So that's really key, is to have that host. So every stream had the 2 players and the host. And then, of course, there's people walking in and out all the time. Now, one of the things I mentioned is there was a table set up outside the stream rooms for people to play other games. One table. It was actually the most comfortable table to play on because it was quite high, like a bar level. So it was actually super comfortable. But unfortunately, right right around, that's the room where a lot of people were sleeping. So overnight, and as one of the non-RTT players, I was kind of like on the overnight shift a lot. Unfortunately, we weren't able to play there because that's where people were sleeping. So that's the main reason why I didn't get to play many games outside of the ones I played on stream, and also why it wasn't useful to film content, because if you weren't in one of the stream rooms, everybody else were sleeping. So I personally got there at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, and then it kicked off at 5 p.m. with the big session, which was pretty funny. And then I had a game at 6 where I played Adam from Down Under Network, and we tied, and I'll go over that in a second. Then I had nothing till 3 a.m., so I went to sleep for a few hours because I had a raging headache from traveling, and I was not feeling good. So then I got up at 2:30 in the morning, Ubered back to Colin's house, and played 3 a.m. game against Danny from Mob Rules Podcast. If you've never heard Mob Rules Podcast, do check it out. It's super funny, a great podcast. Super nice guys. And they come down from Alaska, obviously. And so then I played a game, and then basically hosted a game till 9 in the morning. And then I had all of the second day, while the RTT was going on, a chance to catch up on some sleep. So I slept for about 5 or 6 hours, and then basically I was up for 32 hours from that point. Overnight on the Saturday night, all the way through the Sunday, through to the end of Charity Hammer. Then we went out for dinner. Then we went back and I slept, and then I got up at 4 a.m. the next morning, flew back. So it was pretty tough physically, but without the headache, I was able to do it. It reminded me of my old resident days when you would do 24 hours on call and just be up all night. So it was pretty cool, and definitely an experience to play Warhammer so late at night. And amazing that we had such large audiences at all times of day, because, of course, people are all around different time zones. Right when things are starting to really get quiet, then it would be like East Coast people waking up. So it was pretty cool. It was for me, the best part of Charity Hammer was meeting everybody. So I'd heard of all of these people, and I had met a few of them before. So I'd met Peter before, I'd met Nick before, but it was really awesome to meet people like Colin and Mitch and everybody that I met, and really a privilege for me to play against some of these guys. I would have loved to play against everybody. It just wasn't going to work out that way, but the few games I did get in were amazing, and everybody was so helpful, and talking 40K constantly, lists and here and there. I managed to get some sneak peeks from some of the people. So it was just a great time, irregardless of the playing. Even if I was just going to host, I would still do it. If I wasn't doing anything, I would still go. It's just, even if you just sit there and soak in the expertise, you would learn a lot. The coolest thing I accomplished this weekend was actually to get real switched on to a couple of things that I had not considered playing before, and you're going to be seeing it on the stream within the next couple of weeks. One is I really, because I got the privilege of watching and hosting a couple of games with Chris Blackham, who I think is top 10 in the ITC right now. I got to see him play Seer Council and really talk to him about it, and we went through his list. He's been messaging me with some recent changes, and so I'm really into trying that. And because his list was mostly stuff that I have, a lot of Drukhari and some Eldar stuff, I'm really excited to actually play, and I'm going to be able to get some of my own back from eating all the Doom and Jinx all these years. So that's exciting. I didn't ever think that was going to happen, but Chris, first of all, is a super amazing guy if you've ever met him. He's just your typical English gentleman, especially at 4 a.m. when he's kind of tired, and even while he's kicking your ass, he's super nice, and so it was really enjoyable to see that. Secondly, you got to see Marines losing. Two Marines to other Marines. You got to see which Marines are better and in what circumstances, and we got to see Marines losing to things like Tau or ridge runners, or like you saw a lot of that going on. And so it was really, and you saw that the mentality of these people was not that, oh, that's overpowered. Everybody knew what was overpowered. These people are playing all the overpowered things, okay? They're trying to win the ITC. They're trying to win LVO. They're going to play the most overpowered things. They don't complain about what's overpowered and what's not overpowered. They just try and come up with ways of countering it. And so it was amazing to see that happen. And so it was like, okay, Imperial Fist beats Iron Hands if it goes first. If there's 2 Imperial Fist players, whoever goes first wins. There's like, there's all these kind of things. And, we had Siegler there and Brian Pullen, who were kind of the top 2 Tau players, and they beat Submarines, but Submarines beat them. And it was really interesting going back and forth. Then there's Eldar, there's Seer Council, there's Mech Spam, and then there's this crazy Ridge Runner list that Alex was playing for NIDS and GSC. And then there's Mark Perry's Possessed Bomb. And it was really interesting to see how these things interacted. In the middle of all that was like me and my little pew pew Custodes, but it was super interesting to see how that all came together. There was like Peter putting out like 27 Thunderhammer attacks on the charge. Like there was all this stuff going on, but it was really interesting to see what we're probably going to see at LVO, which is Marine meta. Who can out-Marine the other person. So that was pretty interesting. And it's also cool to see everybody playing different lists or playing their opponent's list. A few guys swapped lists just so they can learn a lot more about what their opponents are playing and how they play them so that they can play themselves better. So that was pretty cool as well. So those were kind of the coolest parts about Charity Hammer, meeting the people, just being there, seeing all this high level play going on. Like even if you go to a big event, it's just the concentration of expertise and Collins House is not small, but in a smallish place was pretty amazing. I got the speed paint a model. That was pretty cool. So it was amazing. Welcome Random Scrub 2 and of course Lost Mystery. Welcome guys. Thanks for tuning in. So that's basically a quick summary of Charity Hammer. There are rumors and plans in the making for next year, improving the quality of the video, and by doing that, so improving the internet feed. It was kind of glitchy at times, and we finally discovered that if you kept the doors open and didn't use your cell phones, it was better. But we try and improve that next year. Want to improve the stream quality in terms of video and audio quality, more lighting, and probably it's going to be at a different location next year. Collins House is great, and bless to Stephanie, his wife, for hosting 20 plus sweaty, probably slightly obese gamer dudes just making a mess and trashing the place, and cooking us all our food. Big shout out to Stephanie for hosting. I can't imagine. My wife probably would have killed herself. So that's just amazing, and it was great to see. And she's a super nice person the whole time. Gus the dog, shout out to Gus the dog, and to those little sausage dogs. I think those were Chris's. I don't know what their names were, but shout out to those little things. And so it was pretty cool. Shout out to Seattle Uber scene for quick, efficient Ubers at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, on the dot. So shout out to those Prius driving Uber drivers. Almost every Uber driver is like a Prius or a hybrid. It's pretty funny. And so that was great. And it was great to see so many Canadians. Jim and Alex, and JT, and Peter and myself. It was great. Who came the farthest? Adam came the farthest, miles-wise. He came from Australia. But Peter definitely traveled the longest. He drove 8 hours to get to Edmonton, then realized that he'd forgotten his passport. Then somebody had to fly down the next morning, and then he flew in, and then the same trip back. So it's quite the epic journey for Peter the Falcon. But it's awesome. It's actually great to see Peter actually playing. Okay. So let's talk about my games. So my first game was on the Friday night after I arrived, 6 p.m., and that is on stream number 2. That will be on the CanHammer channel. One of the first games. The first game, actually. He was playing, so I was playing my list that I was taking. So just to remind you, I was taking 2 Caladius, 1 Blaze, 5 Aquilon, 7 Wardens, the 2 characters, single Vexilla, and Hector Rex. And so he was playing an interesting eclectic mix. Some big unit of breachers with fist and arc rifles. For some reason I can't remember already. 3 tank commanders, so 2 of the normal commanders and the Talarn commander. He was running some scouts from Dark Angels, as well as Sammy and the Talon Master, and running some of the Scutari Trooper dudes. There was one other... Oh, man, it's such a blur. There was one other big unit of something that was threatening. Yeah. Anyway, so you can see the game. I'm not going to go over it in detail, but it was a super tight game, and I made a few bad mistakes, and I got a little bit lucky at the end on some dice rolls. Trajan made an epic 10-inch charge in the last turn and took out the Talon Master, and so we ended up with a tie, which is amazing. And it was the Battle of the Colonials, and so that was cool and a good way of starting Charity Hammer. Adam is an amazing guy, super great player, and I learned a lot from playing him. Hector Rex rating for that game, 5 out of 10. And we'll talk about Hector Rex afterwards. Second game was early in the morning at 3 a.m. after a few hours of sleep, without a headache, but super tired, against Danny from Mob Rules Podcast. And he was playing Iron Hands, 3 Flyers, Leviathan, Chaplain Dread, and lots of intercessors, that sort of thing. And basically, he just blew me away. And I didn't really have much play, and there wasn't really much to do. The terrain was set up in such a way with the deployment that all the fire lanes were kind of straight on. There wasn't really much place to hide, and so it didn't last very long against that. So that's kind of the Hector X rating in that game was probably around 4 or 5. And then the final game, which was the next morning, I think at 6 a.m. against Mitch Pelham from Best in Faction, of course. Super amazing to play Mitch, finally. I love the podcast. And this was actually the first game he played in about a year. I think he suffered a head injury or a concussion a year ago, and since then he's not played at all, but he's been judging and TOing and really contributing positively to the community by running things and being TO. He's one of the senior judges at LVO, so kudos to Mitch for doing that. And I was honored to be his very first game of 40K in a year. And he brought his, Mitch is known for theory crafting and list writing, so he brought this list, which was kind of perfect against me. Talarn Tank Commander, 2 Demolishers, 3 Punishers, which weren't going to do much, and then I think 4 or 3 Dreadnoughts, Double Laz, Fist, Chaplain Dreads, and then Space Wolves, and Murderfang, and Bjorn, and a Wolfguard Battle Leader. Now, this was actually a pretty tactical game, but I made a crucial error. I did not ask him to remind me what Space Wolves do. I haven't seen Space Wolves forever. And so it was like 6 in the morning, and I forgot to ask. And so I didn't realize they piled in 6 inches, number one. And I definitely didn't realize Armor of Rust makes you attack last. So that combination with some slightly over-aggressive Warden play, they would have been fine otherwise, meant that they were wiped out and Aquilon failed to charge, and it was basically game over. But that was a pretty interesting game, and of course, Mitch is an amazing guy, and it was a fun game to have at 6 in the morning on a Sunday. So those were my 3 games. And Hector X in that game, I put him in the building to get me recon but didn't realize that we had agreed, probably, I don't know, I can't remember, and it was early, that one of the walls wasn't line of sight blocking because it wasn't like a window or anything, and so the Tallarn tank commander just shot him and ganked him big time, and it didn't make hardly any 3-ups. So Hector Rex rating in that game, 1 out of 10. So great game. And super fun. So I didn't manage to play any other games on the weekend. I probably would have liked to play maybe 2 or 3 more, but it was a pretty packed schedule. Next year I'm going to have to do some kind of I don't know how you would prepare for that sort of thing. But as I said, it was amazing just being around and learning from everybody and watching them play. I mean, I watched more games of 40K, whole games of 40K from beginning to end that weekend than I have ever watched, probably cumulatively. So it was pretty amazing. Had good chats about Custodes with some of the guys there who were into Custodes. So Harrison and Michael Timpe and Brian Pullen, and had really good chats, speak with Nick about things. And so it was really quite good to talk about these things. So, what we're going to do now is I wrote a bunch of notes and talking points about talking about Custodes and what I learned from the weekend. Before we do that, I just mentioned that the hot tip is that people think white scars are the army to bring if you want to win LVO. Take it or leave it. It's up to you. Hot tip. So, in terms of the meta LVO, we're going to see Marines. I think most of the top armies will, in the top 16, the majority of them will be Marines. I think probably Iron Hands and Imperial Fists. If anyone plays White Scars and they're good at it, probably them. I don't think we're going to see that many Raven Guard. So I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see probably some Tau. I'm not even sure if Richard Siegler is playing Tau. I know for sure probably Brian's playing Tau. And then we're going to see some Eldar. Probably Mech Eldar, Flyers and Tanks combination, maybe Seer Council. But that's still super strong. And while I'd like to say we're going to see Nids and 8 or 9 Ridge Runners, I don't think it's going to last through 6 games at LVO. So I think that's what we're going to see. I don't think there's going to be any surprises because Marines is just so overwhelmingly strong. But we'll see. I mean, I'm no expert on it, but I think we're just going to see a replay of what we saw at Charity Hammer. We might see some chaos, so there's a few good chaos things going around here, but I think Marines is pretty strong. Mark Perry's Possessed list is pretty good, and there's a bunch of other chaos things floating around right now. But Possessed Bomb seems pretty strong, whether somebody like Mark or TJ can, and maybe Jim, if he decides to play chaos, can kind of power that through to the top 16. I guess we'll find out. But it's going to be, pretty hefty on the Marines. So, what I did find out was that from the weekend, likely there will be an addition or a version change this spring, early summer, May, June time, after the fiscal year. You can probably take that to the bank. There's going to be maybe 3 or 4 more Psychic Awakening books to wrap up the rest of the factions that haven't received anything. And Custodes is slated to be February. And then something big is going to happen May, June time. It's been 3 years since 8th dropped. Everybody's gotten 2 books. And so something big is going to happen in June. We don't know the specifics, but it sounds like there's going to be a simplification of things. It's going to be a condensation again of the rules explosion that we've had over the last year or so. And things are going to be getting quote unquote smaller. To the point of possibly the table size changing. And this is on pretty reliable grounds that we know of this. So that is probably happening at the end of the spring. So with that in mind, and what I don't think we're not the rumors that it's not going to go back to brand new books and indexes because we just got rid of them. Is that the purpose of the recent codexes and the Psychic Awakenings is to get the armies into this new edition ready style or format. So what we might see is that right now playing 2,000 points of current Psychic Awakening Marines is like crazy, but maybe after this version change happens, now it plays more like 1,000 points. Who knows? But it seems to be apparently what is going to happen. Take that for what you will. This is coming from the mouths of playtesters, so I think it's fairly reliable. Yeah, there you go. So, the playtesters are seeing things out like 12 to 14 months. And so, I think the next 4 months is going to see the rest of the PA factions get their Psychic Awakenings. And obviously, just like the whatever it was called, when like G-Man came out, just like that kind of story arc led into 8th edition, this Psychic Awakening story arc is probably leading into 8.5 or 9th or whatever you want to call it, whatever. I don't actually think 8th edition is officially called 8th edition anyway. I think it's just called Dark Millennium, so who knows, they'll call it something. And so that is probably going to happen in a few months' time. Yeah. So with that in mind, Death of the Emperor, who knows? I personally haven't been reading the story. Maybe I should. Maybe I should go back and read the fluff of the Psychic Awakening books. I'm actually still waiting to receive some of them because the Christmas kind of shipping and stuff really kind of screwed up some of the deliveries. But yeah, so it's pretty interesting. We'll see what happens. There's still exciting times ahead for me before that happens. I'm still waiting for Dark Angels to drop. I'm a little bit scared that it's going to mean I need to buy new models because most of my current 20,000 points is not Primaris based. Hopefully I won't have to buy too many, but I'm prepared for it. But I think we have to entertain possibly picking up the Dark Angels again. And then, of course, Custodes coming out in February. And so, speaking of Custodes, the word on the street is that we are getting lots of fun stuff, quote unquote, fun stuff, but no fundamental changes to the army. So take it for what you will. Probably some relics, maybe some new traits, and definitely some stratagems. So keep that in mind as we talk about Custodes going forward from CanHammer. I don't think there's going to be any crazy Custodes breakthroughs at LVO. Eric has told me Eric is not playing Custodes, and I'm not sure who else is going, but in the current meta, and especially with what we think LVO tables are going to look like, it's just not going to be a thing. So we'll see what happens. So, you guys talking about Death of the Emperor, some new Primarchs, maybe the Return of the Emperor. Who knows, man? Who knows? Yeah. Certainly, like, the Custodes are kind of striking out to take part in kind of the crusade, and so they maybe don't feel the need to protect the Emperor anymore, and so who knows what's going to happen. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about Custodes. This is kind of like Custodes Tactica, though it's not technically a Tactica, but these are basically learnings from CanHammer about my army, about Custodes as a whole, talking to some of these players, and talking a little bit about what might be coming up in terms of our book and in terms of edition change and things like that. So I wrote down a whole bunch of talking points here so we can go over it. Okay, number 1. Tanks are a liability. So I've, up to this point, I've always been trying to mix like bikes, foot, and tanks. And because we have good tanks, Caladius tank, Palace tanks. And so trying to make an all-comers list, and arguably for my local meta here, where we still have a lot of knights and things like that, that tanks were pretty good. And they went through a period where they were very extremely good and then got a little bit nerfed, and then now they're kind of still pretty good tanks. Caladius tank's still great. The Blaze, I'm less sold on the Blaze after this weekend. But it's still a Caladius body, which makes it decent. So I previously had a couple of palaces in my list and found that they were giving up easy kills. They may get me the odd recon, but we're giving up easy kills. And then with Marines coming out, I was giving up 3 or 4 big game hunters almost every turn. Before Marines, I hardly ever gave up 3 or 4, 3 big game hunters off my tanks. So it really changed things. And when you have basic troops shooting 36 inches with no penalty, full rerolls, and wounding on 5s, but -3, 2 damage, or 3 damage with Imperial Fist, or if you got flyers with like assault cannons that are -2 doing 2 damage every single shot and hitting you on 2s re-rolling, and you're hitting them back on 4s. It's really not a good meta for a weak mech these days. Your mech needs to do 2 things to succeed. Either be really hard to kill, be super killy, or you have so much of it that it doesn't matter. So that's probably where we come into where the mech spam Custodes list, so 3 Caladiuses, maybe an Orion or an Ares, and a bunch of Palace tanks that can succeed as long as you don't meet these matchups. You meet Imperial Fist matchups, they go first, you're dead. Same with Iron Hand. So, these are, as I always say, meta dependent, but really just in the general frame of mind, a full mech list can probably do pretty well. You may even go 5-0 at a GT if you don't meet those lists, or you don't have people around you playing those lists. But if you're going to LVO with a full mech Custodes list, you're not going to get into top 16 like that. So that is the one thing, first learning point from Charity Hammer: tanks are a liability. So I'm actually decided for the next month or so until we get our book to not play with tanks. I'm going to go back to using non-mechanized Custodes for a little bit. Number 1. Hector Rex and Inquisition. I don't think it's worth it. There's so much less psychic out there now. However, if you play in an area where there's a lot of Eldar players and Chaos players, then it might be worth throwing in the denial. Inquisitor over Calexis Assassin any day. Cheaper, doesn't cost you CP, way more, and can cast stuff. So I would not bring a Calexis in. It's been that way for some time. Let's not talk about that at all. So I think the Inquisitor can definitely fit a niche depending on what you're playing against. In general, though, I don't feel like it does enough. I don't feel Hector Rex does enough for 100 points. Yeah, he has a Storm Shield, but I tell you what, that's not going to save him. A T3 model, 5 wounds, Storm Shield not going to save you. And 3 cast, 4 denies, you don't need. And so, but 1 cast, 1 deny, or 2 denies is probably too little, not worth it. So it's kind of that sweet spot you're missing. I found that the Inquisition spells are just like a little bit too short. Like 12-inch to target characters. When you're dropping in a 9, if the person's smart, like it's always just a little bit outside of range, or you're not able to do it. I just find like the powers are just like 3 inches too short or 6 inches too short. And so he wasn't that useful even in those when he didn't have anybody denying him. He was not able to get a lot of spells off. And then because you have so few models to protect him, he ends up just getting picked off pretty easily. So yeah, I just don't feel like our army is well suited to protect weak models like that. And low, if you're playing Marines, is it Iron Hands or is it just a Marine stratagem? But you just shoot your intercessors for CP and you can wipe them off. So it's not even a big roadblock. So eliminators, all that sort of stuff. So I gotta say, I was not impressed by Inquisitors, and I don't think it's going to be worth it for most people to run Inquisitor. For 100 points, I think you could do better. Even like another Terminator would be better. So that's my thoughts on Hector Rex and Inquisition. So Hector Rex goes back on the shelf. Got a really nice paint job though, so still pretty good. Okay, next talking point. If you have comments or questions, please put them in the Twitch chat. We'll be happy to discuss. How to play Custodes going forward? I think for now, until we get our book, the most effective way is going to be probably the most effective way that has been so far, which is still what we now are calling hide Stodes, apparently, but hiding and denial. And so a foot list will do that very well because you can hide your people. I think bikes lose out on that because it's harder to hide them and you can't go through walls. I think maybe there's even a role for like Venatari. But I think that kind of list, like what Eric was playing CCBB, is going to be the most competitive way of getting low scoring, close wins, on a round by round basis. So we're going to be doing some of that coming up in the next month until our book comes out. See how that goes. As I say, the other probably okay way to play Custodes these days is mech Custodes. And whether you want to do the meme list with 2 Land Raiders, or whether you just want to do 3 Pallas, 3 Caladius, and an Ares or an Orion, it's up to you. I don't think it really matters. There's a lot of efficient shooting in a mech list. Things are relatively hard to kill, but not really. And you will table fools to go 4-1, maybe 5-0 if you're lucky and you don't meet those matchups. So I think that's another fairly much easier way of playing Custodes than being very meticulous about how you're hiding and requiring a lot of terrain. I did play a game against, I forgot to mention it, I played that game against Zach. It was supposed to be Tau against Custodes, and we thought that was really boring. So actually, you guys donated so for me to play the Devon Swan meme list with the 2 Land Raiders and the 3 Caladius tanks and other stuff. And he, instead of me just shooting Riptides with it, he brought out a Warhound Titan, which Harrison had. Harrison, if you think I have a lot of Forge World, you haven't seen Harrison's basement. So we just played a best 2 out of 3, who would die first, my list or the Warhound Titan, and I won 2-1 on that. With Wardens in the last game, almost chopping down a Warhound Titan, just missing 1 wound. Anyway, so that was fun, but certainly, there's a lot of firepower in 2 Land Raiders, 3 Caladius lists, and you will table a bunch of people, but you will also die very easily to that bad matchup. And that matchup is everywhere. If the bad matchup was nowhere, then it would be fine, but it's just everywhere. So it's not good. So that's the other probably archetype that works pretty well is total mech, and then the kind of hide Stodes foot denial type list. I think my type of list, which I call the normal list, where there's some tanks and there's some foot and it's a mix, I think it generally does well, but it is even worse matched against the bad matchups that deal with the mech list, and doesn't hide as well as the high Stodes list. These are kind of the 3 archetypes. If you want to play a foot, hide, and denial list, if you want to play a heavy all mech list, or if you want to play the in-between kind of balanced list, it really kind of, you can decide what kind of list you want to play depending on what you want to do. Honest Wargamer. Oh my goodness. What time is it there, man? It's like 2 a.m. Go to sleep. Is that Rob or John? I don't know. So that's my thoughts on overall list archetypes moving forward. And this may all change in February. So, we don't have a long to wait for that. We should start getting previews in the next couple of weeks. Okay. 3 p.m. It's not 3 p.m. It's 3 a.m., Rob. Is your heart fibrillating again? Okay. One of the things I think your list needs to do, and one of the things that I really started to struggle with, especially against Marines at CanHammer, was scoring secondaries, picking good ones and scoring them. And so I think that's where something you really need to consider when you're making your list. What secondaries are you going to score, and how are you going to score them, and how often do you think you're going to score them? It's ideal if you have at least 4 to 8 secondary points that you will automatically get, and don't rely on other things. So taking kill secondaries can be difficult against Marines, like really difficult. We can no longer rely on being able to charge things reliably and survive. Okay, and even if you manage to charge and survive and don't die in Overwatch, now you got to survive a bunch of Chaplain Dreads with like 5 attacks that are like wounding you on 2s, re-rolling everything, -3 straight damage. That you just eat that to the face, and it just kills you. So we need to start to score other secondaries, and that's where, when you're talking about the hide list, now you're talking about having units be engineers, so that you're good for 3-4 points for engineers. Of course, assuming there's no Thunderfire cannons around that are going to kick your ass. But a unit of Guardians should survive at least a few turns against Thunderfire cannons if they can't be outranged. And you want to try and give them other things that they can shoot at. So I think engineers is something that you can really look at. If you're playing in an area where there are magic boxes or L runes, you might start thinking about things like King of the Hill. Okay, if you put 2 bully units in the middle, King of the Hill might work for you for 2, maybe 3 turns. That's something else to consider that traditionally we have not considered. So that's another secondary to think about. I think the days of us surviving to the end and doing ground control are over. I don't think any of our lists are going to last that long. And especially depending on where the objectives end up and how many there are. One of the games I played, the objectives were just out in the open. They weren't in any runes or anything, and it was just bad news. So those are what you got to think about. How is my list going to score secondaries? Recon is really getting difficult to score with your foot units, and your palace tanks aren't going to last any longer. In fact, probably less long. And so recon is actually kind of hard unless you can sit in the middle, get your King of the Hill, and get your recon that way. So that's something to consider. I think recon is still something that you can score, and it's also deployment dependent. But you have to think about, how am I going to score this recon 4 turns in a row? So that's a difficult thing too. So kind of it's really difficult right now, and we don't have the units to just throw away to score a recon point and then they die, so yeah, that's where it becomes so difficult, because we're so few models, we don't last as long as we used to, and so we can't easily score those kinds of things. So it's difficult. I don't have all the answers. I never said I did, and but I think you really have to put some thought when you're making your list. What can I score, and what can I stop my opponent scoring? Because you're not going to score a lot of points. It's rare you're going to get into the 30s. So you really need to think about, what am I going to allow my opponent to score? And so these lists now of giving up 3 or 4 big game, 4 guaranteed gangbuster, you're already 4 down, I just don't think they can work anymore. And so I think you have to try and deny not only kills, but deny secondaries, because you're going to win by gutting it out, low scoring game by like 1 or 2 points. So there's that. The thing there's a lot of gun lines right now. There's probably more gun lines now than ever. AdMech is kind of gun line. Most of the strong Marine builds are super gun line. Either that or hyper aggressive in your face, but they don't seem to be doing as well. Tau is obviously gun line, although if you watch Brian and Richard play, they are very mobile gun lines. And then, so if you can control the board, if you have enough terrain, and you obviously have the striking power, it can win you a game. But you have to have enough units in your army to do that. And so you're trying to find this balance between having too few units or too many units or small units that are easy to kill, and having enough presence on the board to just not get overrun or hemmed in the corner. And that is the problem, again, with mech lists or having a group of 3 tanks at the back, is you kind of get hemmed in until it's now too late for you to score secondaries. And so it's difficult. But that's something to consider. Like, how are you going to control at least your part of the board? Because you can easily get overrun. Red, green, welcome. Okay, the next thing I want is Tanglefoot. Tanglefoot is our best stratagem. I think Homer is a close second, but Tanglefoot is our best stratagem. And so I think moving forward, we're going to have to play lists that have more CP, and that's going to probably have to involve running the old battalions for multiple reasons. Battalions give you your engineers, battalion gives you CP, and battalions gives you more units to hold objectives. And then we need that CP, and I personally know that I don't use Tanglefoot enough. I actually forget to use it in the ends of games when it's most vital. But so I think you got to be constant, like write it on your forehead, tape it to the back of your hand, put a big, Tanglefoot on a piece of paper in front of your face. I think people should be liberally using Tanglefoot as often as they can to slow and disadvantage the enemy. I think you should just be throwing it twice a turn. Yeah, in the movement phase, Tanglefoot something. In the charge phase, Tanglefoot something. Make them think about it. Make them change their game plan. Tremor shells and things like that, so powerful. A tremor shell stratagem actually stops certain army archetypes from even being played. And so Tanglefoot is so good. And despite people knowing about it, it's still a gotcha. And you can't really play around it. Do you just not move then because you're scared of being Tanglefooted? I mean, and if that's the case, then you don't even have to spend the CP and you've achieved the results. So you got to threaten it, you got to make it known that it's there, and you got to use it. And so that's something I need to improve on over the next few weeks, is spamming Tanglefoot. And so then also you need more infantry. So I think that's super important. We should be spamming Tanglefoot. Good players know how annoying and how good Tanglefoot is. Okay. Another thing, we don't have any good answers for things that shoot at us from the back out of line of sight. We just don't have that as an army. We have no way of dealing with that, and we don't have a way of doing it ourselves. So it's a real problem for us, and we don't have an answer for that right now. Possibly, there may be a role here for a unit of 3 Alaris, or a small unit of Venatari, 3 or 4 Venatari, to go and drop in turn 3 just to try and disrupt, Scorpius is sitting at the back, whirlwinds, Thunderfire cannons. And so that's a serious consideration. The only problem with dropping in on 3 Thunderfire cannons is it's usually surrounded by a whole crap ton of Marines who haven't moved all game in Devastator Doctrine, and then you're fucked, basically. So I don't know how useful that is, but this consideration should be given in your list to what are you going to do about out of line of sight shooting that's like 60, 72-inch range or more that you can't avoid and just whittles you down over time. Like if they have 6 turns to shoot at you, they will kill whatever it is that they need to shoot at. Just just through time, and you won't be able to score your full engineers. So that is a real problem for us and something that people consider. You will never get through to them from the front, and if you do, you've already won. So that is a big problem. So the other thing is, if you have a small surgical unit like that, you might be able to just keep the person honest from moving too far up, so it's funny as George is literally saying things like right while I'm about to say things, same points. So that is definitely something to consider in your list, is how are you going to deal with that shooting. It doesn't matter. In the old days, it was like guard mortars. Who cares? That does nothing to us. It's useless. But Thunderfire cannons are not that. Thunderfire cannons are strong. Whirlwinds that are doing 2 damage, strength 7 -1, 2 damage, that's strong. Like Scorpius tanks, there's so much now. Even like SMS shooting at -1 damage, like that will get you onto 3 up, and that will kill things. So it's really difficult. A Imperial Fist Thunderfire cannon is just gonna wreck you. Ignores your cover. It's gross. And those things are basically the cost of like 1 Terminator. So it's really difficult. But you need to consider how you're gonna deal with that if you can. And we don't have a lot of tools. Okay, good. Moving right along. I think that there's less concern about T8 now. Unless you play in a local meta where there's still a lot of people playing knights, they've kind of disappeared. The 3-4 knight list is much less common than it used to be. What you're really going to be facing now that's T8 is maybe tank commanders. And generally, those guys are at the back, talarning back and forth inside a ruin and shooting you for the whole game, and you won't ever get there. Again, maybe another thing for having a drop-in unit that can disrupt the back. So, but if you don't have that, you're never going to get to those tank commanders. So it's probably not worth spending 200-400 points on tanks to slowly whittle them down from long range. In the meantime, you've got all this points and stuff sitting at the back there. And the other thing is, those tank commanders kill your tanks even easier than you kill them. So it's not a good trade, and you've spent a lot of points on that. So I think we just have to drop the worry about T8 now. So does that mean we drop Aquilon? I don't know. I don't think so, because a unit of 5 Aquilons still kills more than like a unit of 7 Wardens. But I think you have to think about it now. Why are you taking your Aquilons? What are you going to play? What are you going to play against? What is the likely things you're going to play against? I think you have to give that consideration now. Whereas in the higher T8 meta before, then you seriously have to take the Aquilon no matter what. We don't see repulsors anymore. We don't see those things anymore. And so, yeah. So, I tell you what though, Aquilon is still great at killing Centurions. That -4 is so much better than -2 or -3. And strength 10, wounding them on 2s is so key. So I think that you still take Aquilon. But it's certainly less imperative than you did before. Okay. So that's another thing to say is T8. So, if in fact we are getting more stratagems and they are going to be fun stuff, if by that you mean like Kawhi Leonard is a fun guy, then I think that also then makes it more imperative now that we're looking for battalions and that we're going to need CP. So up until this point, I've been a huge proponent of not necessarily building your list just for CP and paying that battalion tax. But for so many reasons that we've already discussed, I think that the battalion now becomes what we need to play. It's foot list. lots of Tanglefoot, CP for Tanglefoot and for other stratagems that we might be getting, hiding, denying kills, engineers. I think there's a lot of compelling reasons now to play the battalion list. And there's many different variations of foot lists and battalions that you can play, and we'll talk about that soon. But I think that becomes a real, now that maybe becomes the most favorable archetype, other than playing straight up all mech, as we already discussed. So I think that becomes a thing. Do we still have some backline shooting? That's a question that comes up when I'm making my version 4 lists. Do we still have one thing at the back that gives us a little bit of long range reach? We never had that before Forge World came out, and now we have some options. So do we have a single Custodes at the back that sweeps around, goes up the flanks, and still shoots things? Either a normal Custodes, because that gun is still good because it puts out so many shots and it does 2 damage, or maybe one Blaze, which I'm less enthused about, or even a Telemon. So do we have a Telemon at the back? Or maybe not red at the back. Do we have it up at the front? It becomes a bit of a gun soak. It's not that easy to kill. You know, T8, 14 wounds, 4 up invuln is not easy to kill, as any impulsor will tell you. And impulsor is only T7. And then and you just accept that it's going to be hitting on 3s all the time and stay mobile. And try and overcome its crappy range nerf. It also got strength 9 to strength 8. Also is not good, but I think it may be worth trying the Telemon out as a slightly mobile gun platform. Maybe I'm just trying to wish list the Telemon back into existence, but there might be a role for one thing at the back that roves around shooting, and maybe just the normal Custodes might be the best candidate for that at 200 points. So something to consider. This has come up a few times in the chat. Axes versus spears on wardens. So assuming you have the same number of wardens, okay, same number of attacks. So it's harder to compare guardians to wardens. But if you're just taking the same model just with different weapons, 2-point difference is really nothing in a Custodes list. Okay, so let's not need to talk about the points. So on one side you have wounding heavy stuff on 5s, with a possibility of +1 to wound stratagem, versus strength 8 with a stratagem to make it -3 instead of -2. So this becomes a thing of math, and if you math it out, it really only matters for T7 and T5. Everything else is a wash. So at T8, you're spending a CP to make it wound on 4s, and the axes already wound on 4s. So, and then you're spending a CP to make the AP equivalent. So those two things are identical with the CP spendage at T8. At T7, the axes are now wounding on 4s. The spears are wounding on 4s, but the axes are wounding on 3s. So therefore, axes are better. At T6, now your spears are wounding on 3s, same with the axes. You could spend a CP now. Spears are wounding on 4s, 3s with the expenditure, and the axes again wounding on 3s with CP spending it to -3. So equivalent again. Same with 5. When you get to 5, now the spears are wounding on 3s. Can go to 2, and the axes wounding on 3s only. So the spears, again at T5, are better. And then 4 and down, 4 is the axes are better because they're wounding on 2s, and then 3, everything's equivalent again. So basically, it's really 7 and 5 are the 2 break points. So, so you need to just figure out what you're going to be playing against the most, and considering Marines are still T4, mostly, except Centurions, then probably the axes generally just work better than the spears. because then you're wounding on you're wounding on 2s without spending any CP, and then you can decide depending on their current armor save, because there's so many ways of changing their armor save, if you need to spend a CP on the AP or not. So generally, I think the axes are better. So that's another thing that I spent some downtime calculating out in my head. And forgive me if I'm wrong, because my math sucks. Okay, so Guardian Bomb. So this topic has come up. Now that we're running a battalion, do we make one of those units of Guardians extra big? I think Guardians are just... It's like 3... The 3 wound really gets me, and that's what I hate about the Wardens. And the Feel No Pain, 6 of Feel No Pain is really nothing. So, I mean, they're cheap, but you almost feel like you should run like a Storm Shield or 2 in there. So, and then these guys only have 3 attacks instead of 4, which is a big difference. So a unit of like 7 or 8 Guardians has just about the same number of attacks as a unit of Wardens, and Wardens are getting so much cheaper. So I really don't feel that there's much space for Guardian Bomb these days. But it's certainly something worth considering. You're looking to run your list with at least 2 to 3 hammer units, and so that could be one of them. But then you're really kind of obligated to be throwing out the +1 wounds stratagem pretty liberally. And it just, in my experience, Guardians with spears just don't last very long. So, you know, and it's not like they're super, super much cheaper than Wardens. So I think Wardens still beat out on that. The Warden's also a big, you know, deep striking is probably a thing. And so having to spend CP to deep strike things kind of sucks. But, you know, we have to do that for everybody except for the Terminators. So yeah. Vexillas. So right now, some people are running double Vexilla, and that's cool. I think +1 attack is, after this weekend, I can see now that +1 attack is actually quite like we need it. So many times we're left with things on 1 or 2 or 3 wounds left, where that +1 attack would have made the difference. The problem is finding the points. Because if you're needing to put in 100 and something points for another banner, now you're dropping a Terminator and something else, 2 Terminators, or a Warden, or 2 Wardens, or so you got to find the points from that from somewhere. And adding +1 attack banner, but then taking away 4 attacks, 8 attacks is kind of counterproductive. So, and it increases your character presence in terms of giving up Headhunter, and you don't get it if you're not in position. So, you know, it becomes, and then you don't want the guy to die, so then you give them a relic or a storm shield, and then they can't really fight, and so, you know, it's difficult. So I'm not sure if double Vexilla really is the best way to go. I think we just need to play it. It also limits how you place your models, right? Because then you feel like you always need to be next to the +1 attack. And then so now you're kind of daisy chaining and you're kind of stuck in the middle. And so there's always that restriction that you place on yourself by playing auras. So I need to experiment with it. Actually, my current list doesn't have it because I didn't want to give up that 100 points of other stuff. But it's certainly, well, actually, no. It probably, I think it does. Anyway, ignore me. Tired. I think that's definitely worth considering. I think +1 attack is really welcome, and this weekend really just confirmed that for me, that we need +1 attack and that we still need -1 to hit. So if you're not playing Marines, everybody else is really screwed by -1 to hit still. Knights, tank commanders, AdMech, Guard is completely fucked by -1 to hit. You know, Necrons don't Tesla with -1 to hit. -1 to hit is still a huge thing, and we still need it. So now you're obligated to run 2 Vexillas. So I think you should keep that in mind when you're building your lists, the possibility of having 2 Vexillas. Venatari. Yes, I said Venatari. I think there may be a role for Venatari. You just have to accept their shortcomings. And I don't think it's in a massive unit of 6. I think Venatari may exist in a list as a group of 3 or 4 that does what we discussed earlier, which is drop in, maybe take out some characters, or tag whirlwinds, scorpiuses, thunderfire cannons, and hiding in ruins, going through ruins, and then probably dying shortly after. I think that is something to seriously consider. I don't think running 6 Venatari and trying to do lots of stuff with them is the way to go. I think running them as a small surgical unit may be the way to go. Hey Hui, welcome. Happy New Year, man. And now maybe something does that better. Maybe 3 Alaris does that better. Say, more wounds, has character sniping. You can do charge shenanigans by charging and piling in towards characters, even though they didn't anticipate that. So 3 Alaris may serve the same purpose. Who knows? But there is the advantage of fly, which doesn't help you on the turn you drop in though, and then they will die. So maybe that's not that important, and the Alaris are definitely harder to kill. So I think I think a surgical unit is a good idea, and that may be Alaris or maybe Venatari. Something to consider. So I will say only that much about Venatari. So you can't use them how you want to use them, which is as a bike replacement unit. I think you can use them as a more surgical, small unit to cause mischief and then die. And definitely later, like turn 3. So, yeah, you might see some Venatari. Here's a question. Is mech the only answer? Well, I think we already answered that. I think it's one answer. It's one way to play, and probably successful. It's a 3 and 2 at the minimum, probably 4 and 1, probably. So I think mech is a good list. What kind of mech you use probably doesn't matter. It's all just kind of efficient auto hitting shooting, and if you get the bad matchup, you're screwed, and if you don't, you're gonna win. So I think that's a decent way to play. Okay, so much anticipated. We're gonna go through a couple of lists that I wrote. Okay, so the base of the list is a battalion: Trajan Valorous, Shield Captain in Terminator armor, and 3x3 Shield Guardians. So that already takes us up to like 800 points, which is crazy, but that's the way it is. 700 points, 770 points, 750 points. Then we've got our hammer units. So you still can't. I'm still stuck on the 5 Aquilon and the 7 Warden combo. I think it's a great combo. There's a lot of options there with deep striking Wardens or not, especially if you've got CP, and Aquilon's naturally deep strike. 2 good bully units, fairly hard to kill. Will kill most things that they touch, especially if we're running +1 hit. So those are my 2 main hammer units. Then we've got the double Vexilla. So we've got the +1 to hit Vexilla, +1 attack Vexilla, and the -1 to hit Vexilla. Then the flex points. About 200 to 225 points of flex, 230 points of flex. And what you do with this flex now is where the lists differ. And you could write an infinite number of flex where the flex is. So in one of my lists, I have 3 Alaris Terminators as a flex unit. The surgical unit, the drop-in unit, either can drop in the back, tag things, go hunt some characters, or drop in with your 2 other hammer units, deny Overwatch. And do some shenanigans. So the Telemon has the 3 Alaris Terminators will have multiple roles depending on what you need them to do. So I think that's good. That's 12 pretty hard to kill wounds, strength 8, 12 attacks, the shooting's okay, and some useful stratagems. So I think the 3 Alaris is going to be useful, and that's one of my lists. In another list, that flex unit now becomes 2 Palace tanks. I'm not as in love with this one, but 2 Palace tanks, not too hard to hide, gonna get you at least 1 or 2 recon points. You can use them as I did in my other tactica videos, tying things up, charging things so that they can't shoot you, and maybe even getting you behind enemy lines or things like that. So I think 2 Palace tanks, there's some potential there, and you got some leftover points for flamers and shit like that. So I think running 2 Palace tanks might be a nice way of spending 200 points. They're still very points efficient. Their shooting can help you out at range. And so that's the second version of this kind of flex slot. And then it goes from there. If you can free up a little bit of extra points, which I don't think you can, you might be able to run a Telemon. I don't think you'll find the points because you need like another 50 points on top of that. And I wouldn't be dropping hammer units for a Telemon. Unit of Venatari probably slips in there quite nicely, 3 or 4 Venatari. And so that might be the third option as a flex unit there. The problem is the 3 Alaris do the same as the Venatari. They do it harder, and they have stratagems to use that can be useful and can have shenanigans. Whereas the Venatari are easier to kill. They move faster, but they may not get a turn to move. They're easier to kill. They hit less hard, and they have no stratagems, and kind of not as good. So I'm still going 3 Alaris over the 3 Venatari, but certainly that's somewhere you could try the Venatari out as that surgical unit. I really quite like that idea of surgical unit. So those are kind of my 3 current lists, and I'm gonna post them up and pin them on the Custodes Discord, and so people can have a look at that. If you're interested in joining Custodes Discord, lots of people asked me about it since Charity Hammer, and I've actually put it in the Twitch panels below now. There's a link right there. It lives right there. And what I can do now is just do this and put it in the chat. And now it pops up because I have it handy. And so that is something that we welcome all new people and to help join us. So I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that sort of thing. Either here or if you join the Custodes chat, have a chat with us. I hope that was a fairly comprehensive rundown of where I think we are right now. We're not in a good spot. Nobody's going to tell you that we are. I think, as always, against good players with Marine lists, we're going to lose. But against not as good players, even with Marine lists, you can always win if you play well. And so I think that's where we are right now. But I think these are just kind of some ideas and things that have percolated through my brain and since Charity Hammer, and I thought I'd share it with you guys. So let's see. Same people talking about stuff. There we go. Okay, so run for about an hour and a half tonight, so pretty long show. So before I go, the rest of this week we're taking off. It's been really nice actually just to recover. But starting next week, there's going to be 4 streams next week. Monday I'm playing Steve. So this is all ETC practice for CanHammer team. So Monday I'm playing Steve and his sisters, the new Sisters of Battle. He hasn't decided what he wants to play against. It might either be Marines or Custodes. Tuesday we have a game against... My wife's away next week, so there's going to be 4 nights of streaming. Tuesday is a game against Peter, a rematch against Necrons. He's bringing a melee-focused Necron list that he's going to be playing at CanHammer Team Tournament. And again, I don't think he's told me what he wants to play, but that's going to be Tuesday. Wednesday, I'm playing against my old nemesis, Francois. Francois is going to be bringing his ETC list, which is 3 knights, Tyrannus Crusaders, and he wants to play against Eldar, so I'm bringing Seer Council against Triple Knights on Wednesday. And then Thursday, why is that PST? That's weird. There we go. And Thursday is the rescheduled game against Matthew and his Raven Guard. He's got Assault Centurion Heavy Raven Guard, which is playing a CanHammer team. And he wanted to play against Marines. And I think I'm going to put him up against Nick Nanavati's Iron Hands list. So that's next week. 4 nights of streams. It's going to be hardcore. And then the week after that, I've already got Owen from 613 Chaos. He's bringing his ETC list of Chaos. I don't know what it is at this moment, and I think he wants to play against Marines as well. So there's going to be some hyper-competitive ETC play coming up over the next couple of weeks as we lead up to CanHammer Team Tournament, which is February 8th and 9th, so do join us. And so it's going to be a busy week next week. Okay. So I think that just about says it. What I'm going to do is, even though this is not officially a Tactica, I will upload it to the Tactica playlist. So because there's been quite a lot of Custodes talk tonight. So I think that's pretty useful. And then that's it. So with that, we'll wish you guys good night. And